we're talking about like a much higher degree of both time and resource investment compared to what public school physical education looks like now. But if there was like an initial intake assessment when you began middle school or when you began high school,
It'd be sick.
and like how you performed determined which kind of physical education you got and what it was oriented towards and how nice they were to you and things like that, like maybe we could address some of these concerns about public shaming and whether it's being used to actually help improve kids' outcomes.
Team, welcome back to another week of Mops and Mo's. Alex, thank you for joining us again this week. We're going to talk about, well, you would know this if you saw the title of the episode. We're talking about the presidential fitness test, and I have an embarrassing confession maybe. Like right before we were, I don't know how you guys have your house set up. I don't have a lot of desserts.
We got ample desserts on hand.
Well, good for you. But because two things happened. One, I have a 4-year-old, so I have a shit ton of sprinkles everywhere.
Okay.
And then two,
we don't have any sprinkles that I know of.
I hosted some friends for dinner the other night, and I made a lovely, if I must say so, peach galette, which naturally you have to have vanilla ice cream with that. So
I don't know what a galette is. Can we?
Folks can. It's a simple puff pastry, rough puff, and then you lay out your sliced peaches. I like to season mine with some sugar. In a circle, and you fold the dough, or it's a rustic, just look it up. Delicious. But
Drew, big bake-off fan.
Love baking. Which makes this story even sadder because instead of making myself a lovely dessert, I don't know why, I've always had this weird thing with textures on my ice cream. I love, this is going to sound so gross, like crunchy ice cream. Sprinkles on ice cream, right? So I mentioned I have sprinkles. I have leftover ice cream. Dude, I was taking a scoop. Like I would spoon ice cream out, dip the spoon in the sprinkles, and then just eat it. And I did that probably 8 to 10 times while listening to some other content about the fitness test and reading our notes and just getting ready. And it got to the point where I was like, dude, I gotta pull myself away from this. This is disgusting.
Dude, you have a problem? Do you need help?
I do. I will fully admit. So my issue is I'm very good at not buying sweets, but if they find their way into my house through other means, I cannot stop.
That's fair.
And I know people that are the other way, which is they can avoid them when they're in their house, but when they go out, like they buy all the sweets. So interesting. Anyway, if you guys ever see me in public eating crunchy ice cream, that's why. But
you're saying it in a way that sounds gross, but it's not actually gross. Like you like there to be like crunchy elements in the ice cream.
Specifically a shit ton of sprinkles.
Not that the ice cream is crunchy.
Yeah, true. Yeah, a creamy base for sure. But then the texture, the crunchiness, like, oh man, I don't know. It's bad. And I already know I'm going to do it again tomorrow.
There is, I can't remember the term. Right now I'm thinking semantic satiation, but that's with words. There's like a texture or flavor satiation phenomenon that happens where like, all humans subconsciously crave like contrasting and different structures and flavors. So like if you sit down to eat and you're going to eat like only one thing, you will get full much faster than if you have like a variety of things you eat over the course of a meal, because like changes in textures and flavors like reset hunger signals. And like I've been a little bit down that rabbit hole, but not deep. But
is that why you can eat a massive dinner and then still have room for dessert?
Yeah, same thing.
Makes sense. Well, speaking of the evolution of things, tonight or this week, I suppose, it's the presidential fitness test. Maybe we should start at the top. Like, so in case folks were unaware, President Trump has re-implemented the presidential fitness test. Is that fair to say?
How about we back up for a second? No, he technically hasn't.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. We're starting from present, and then we're going to go back to the beginning and work our way back.
By the time you're listening to this, we may know more.
Sure.
But if we're looking strictly at the executive order that came out a week ago,
July 31st,
it reestablishes the president's council, like each president reestablishes the council, and it directs the council to provide guidance to the president on the reestablishment of the test. If you give me a second here, I'll find the exact language. Here we go.
I have it pulled up in front of me.
The council shall recommend strategies for reestablishing the presidential fitness test with any appropriate improvements as the main assessment tool for a presidential fitness award. Subsequent paragraphs also mention challenges, school-based programs, opportunities to increase participation in sports and fitness, promotional campaigns, events, etc. So we don't technically have the presidential fitness test back yet, and there is no guarantee that the test we get will look the same as the historic test. So I've actually seen, this will be me submitting my complaint, some like mainstream media outlets already posted articles about what the test consists of, assuming it will be the same as the previous version of it, pre like 2012. It says in there with any appropriate improvements. So we have this space where the council may suggest changes to the test. And I think that's part of what we'll talk about in this conversation.
I just put 2 and 2 together, and we'll get into some of this when we talk about who's actually on the council. For people who don't know, Trump and Bryson DeChambeau are like buddy ever since Trump was on Bryson's YouTube channel. Bryson DeChambeau is a golfer, by the way. In listing off one of the reasons for doing this, he goes, over the next 3 years, America will host the Ryder Cup, the President's Cup, the FIFA World Cup, and the Olympic Games. 2 of those 4 events are golf tournaments.
Yes.
And I have to think that if you really dug deep, maybe not even dug deep, you could probably diversify your portfolio of international competitions taking place on American soil if you really wanted to. I just have to think that Bryson probably spoon-fed, oh yeah, dude, Ryder Cup and President's Cup are coming to town. They're fun to watch. I would not put them in the same category as the FIFA World Cup or the Olympic Games. Anyway, a fun aside. But anyway, let's go. Where are we going?
Well, before we dive deep, I feel like I have to insert this comment for a second. But if you look at like the history of the president's travel in this administration, a large portion of it is either to go to pro sporting events or to his own golf courses.
For sure. Yeah, there were some pretty funny, as somebody who used to live in Scotland, have a place in my heart for Scottish people. Him getting heckled by Scottish people on his golf course in Scotland was hilarious. There's some great content out there for folks that want to.
Where he started blasting memories so that they couldn't hear.
Yeah, and just quality. Like the funniest, and I'm sure every president has done this when it comes to golf, but like just very clear video evidence of caddies like throwing a ball. Like, oh, look, there it is. It's like, fucking nerd. Okay, enough about golf.
Yeah, we'll leave that aside. Is this the point where we back way up and explain the history of the presidential fitness test?
Let's go way back. And we had an interesting episode a while ago, I guess now, on sort of, I know we didn't talk about the fitness test specifically, but just the history of fitness testing in general. So it might be worth going and having a listen if you guys are into this kind of thing. But I'll turn it over.
We have an episode a while back. We've had a couple of different members of the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, Nutrition appear on this podcast. So we'll talk about the council a little bit and the history of that. May have to have at least one of them back to discuss the future direction. We'll see. But to just get us up to today.
The Wayback Machine.
A lot of the articles coming out in the last week or so talking about the reintroduction of the presidential fitness test say that it either originated in the 50s or 60s. It's worth noting that there was definitely interest in widespread youth fitness testing prior to that, going well back into the 1800s. Different motivations at different times. During World War I and World War II, there was a significant focus on like preparing young people for military service and the types of fitness that go well with that. During the Cold War, there was a huge investment in education of all kinds to try and compete with the Soviets, especially once they got Sputnik up. There was a huge investment in education to try and compete on like academic and engineering standards. But physical education did receive some investment in the 50s as a result of the Cold War stuff. And that gets us up to what you'll hear a lot about, which is the Krauss-Weber test. Dr. Hans Krauss, Dr. Sonia Weber. I don't remember the exact correct term here, but they were postural specialists.
Yes, they were early physical therapists, basically. And they noticed, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but
go ahead.
They noticed an increase in back pain amongst Americans and trying to figure out why that was.
And I think it's worth taking a second to like address what we don't know here. Sometimes it can look like a thing is dramatically increasing when what's really increasing is testing for that thing. You see that more recently in conversations around mental health disorders, autism, a lot of different things where it looks like there's a much, much higher rate of that thing today, but there's actually just much, much higher detection of the thing and it existed before. So I don't know whether there was an explosion of lower back pain in the 50s or not.
I think there was an existential post-World War II crisis where we realized we're moving away from this idyllic pastoral, like pre-industrial towards like, oh, we're all sedentary now.
Yeah, that was definitely happening. But there's also not, like, strong people also get lower back pain.
Sure, exactly.
On the Krauss-Weber test, they looked at the results and did not see a difference in rates of lower back pain between like rural, urban, suburban kids. So like it doesn't seem that like the physicality of life really changes the likelihood of lower back pain. Most people experience lower back pain at some time in their life.
I think it's the testing. I think it's the testing, like you said.
I think so. So that's a layer of this. Also, a lot of assumptions people make about the correlations between posture and health or posture and back pain aren't as good as you think they are. Good posture is a really hard to define thing. There's good and there's bad in there. We make a lot of assumptions around posture that don't hold up to like academic rigor.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that seems to be a recurring theme in the arc of presidential fitness testing that we'll get into. There is not very much critical analysis of any of this ever.
No. And we'll dive into that because I think we're like in an era today where we can be a little more thorough about like the criterion referenced validity of tests and like what we're actually trying to encourage or evaluate. And there just wasn't a lot of that at the time. But anyway, we'll take the Krauss-Weber test at face value. If you read some of the surface level articles, you'll get the same basics. They tested a few thousand kids on the East Coast of the US, and they tested a few thousand European kids from Italy, Switzerland, and Austria. Over half of the American children failed, while only 8% of the European children failed. I should back up and explain what the test is.
Give us the events.
Before they called it the Krauss-Weber test, they called it the minimum muscular fitness test. It's an extremely quick test. It's one rep of each thing. It's go, no go. You either pass or you fail. And it's just, do you have the basic strength to do a sit-up, a straight leg sit-up, a prone straight leg raise, a supine straight leg raise, which is like a reverse Superman. You keep your chest down and lift your legs up, a Superman, and then a forward bend where you put your hands on the ground for 3 seconds. You successfully do all those things, you meet the minimum basic muscular strength. You don't do all those things, you do not pass.
Fun fact, Eisenhower passed. It's part of the reason why he was so passionate about this.
Well, interestingly, there's some fun stuff in the data that we do know, and one is that as you get older, you just get more likely to pass. Like, regardless of training intervention, like just getting older, you probably figure that stuff out.
Practicing.
Yeah, it turns out that practicing the thing makes you better at the thing. And that was a big confounding factor in this, is that European kids at the time in the public school systems they were going through were doing programs that incorporated this kind of stuff. I don't know whether they had less back pain. I just know that they did those things more, so they passed the test more.
I will jump in because I found this interesting in my own digging, which is to say that we're talking about the 1950s-ish post-World War II. I would even include the 40s in some of this, but you mentioned that there was this. So for folks that aren't really following along here, fitness test gets implemented. Europeans crush it. Americans don't. Holy shit, crisis. And you mentioned some confounding variables that were just kind of gleefully glossed over, one of which was that European kids at the time heavily invested into large group calisthenic type education. You can see this when we looked at our episode, the German Turnverein movement.
Yep. That was the Dr. East episode, right?
Yep. Dr. East talked a lot about this. What's interesting, and I haven't gone too deep down this rabbit hole, but because the United States had such an aversion towards German anything, we moved away from large group calisthenic type exercises towards more team sport type stuff. I don't know if that's why we have such a proliferation of team sports today versus what you see in Europe, which much less so. And it was in a podcast that I was listening to. It was just sort of a quick thing, a quick point, but it was really interesting to think about, like, the test what they were able to show was that if the American kids just practice the movements, they could get to the same level that the European kids did. So it's not
and
like
astonishingly quickly, like in a month.
Yeah. So it's not that the test itself unveiled this massive crisis. It's just that we learned that, like, if you do this stuff, you'll be good at this stuff. If you don't do this stuff, you won't be good at this stuff. And I think that, like we said, the lack of critical reasoning, and just a lack of there's a mythology around fitness testing for kids that just for some reason is never questioned, whether it's the 1950s or the 2020s. It's just you better get on board or else you're an asshole. And that's kind of been the story.
I spent a decent chunk of today trying to find any scholarly attempts to validate the Krauss-Weber test.
None.
And there is a robust amount of research confirming that it has good reliability. Like different people test the same kids, they tend to get the same scores. So it's like it's well implemented, right? Like it's very objective in terms of you can score it consistently. You get very, very consistent results across graders. I can't find anything validating whether it predicts any kind of health outcomes to include the back pain that it was supposedly designed for.
I didn't find anything either. And what was interesting too is that from day one, the national security piece of it was tied into, like, we need to do this because it's a national security threat.
Yeah.
And secondarily, because we want our kids to be healthy, but more importantly, because, if we fight the Russians tomorrow, they're way fitter than we are.
And we'll talk about that because I think youth physical fitness is one that like should be extremely nonpartisan, bipartisan. Like everybody should like it for reasons that appeal to all sorts of political backgrounds. But I will say, like in the space we're in, it sounds really good to say this is about national security. There's a national security crisis due to low physical activity. But if you go to the moms of America and argue that like you need your kids to be physically fit so they can serve on the battlefield of World War III, like that's not necessarily the most compelling message.
No.
If you tell them like your kids should be physically active because it's great for their mental health and development and like a million other reasons, like maybe they'll be more responsive. So you might need to message it differently depending on who you're talking to. But I think you can get everybody on board with an issue like this.
Well, there's that. And I made this point before we hit record. I'll probably make it again. And I didn't even put two and two together until we started researching this episode. But like, it's interesting to me that we will use language like national security crisis, which to me sounds very critical. And the best we'll do is implement a test. And you'll see this pattern repeated over and over again. There hasn't been a single administration that's been willing to go so far as to create federal changes to the laws around these sorts of things.
Or put any actual resources
towards it. Let's just a point of, and no offense, because like you said, we've had some of these Presidential Fitness Council folks on here. They're all great people. But the playbook seems to be, let's find the biggest celebrities. Let's put them on this council. Let's create a test, print some T-shirts, and go out and get some video content of kids running around doing some stuff. If it was truly a national security crisis, you would think that we would see increases in funding towards things like physical education. We'd put a lot of resources towards physical literacy. We'd emphasize timeouts. Like there's so many things that you could do, not even getting into the nutrition stuff. But hey, let's just create a test. So anyway, I'm off my soapbox, but you see it in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. It never changes. So
we love talking about this issue. We don't love solving this
doing
issue.
Anything about it.
That'll be a recurring theme here. We will get back on track with getting up to modern day with the history of this whole situation. The results of the Krauss-Weber test come out. It results in a media sensation, lots of calls to action. The results are hand carried to President Eisenhower. He's shocked. You'll see headlines and reports like the report that shocked the president. That's what that's all about. And as a result, he calls a meeting of what becomes known as the President's Council on Youth Fitness. He appoints Nixon to chair that council. And that is what has evolved over time under various presidents. I believe under Kennedy, the youth was removed. This is for everybody, President's Council on Fitness. And it's evolved to include sports and nutrition. So today it's the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition.
I found it interesting that in the early days, the council met at different military bases.
Sure did. I believe one of the meetings was at West Point, correct?
Yes, it was at West Point. And I don't know if the first nationwide pilot study, 8,500 boys and girls aged 5 to 12, kind of kicked things off the Conference on Physical Fitness of Youth, 1957, West Point.
And it
Oh.
was then in 1957 where the first iteration of the presidential fitness test was developed.
Yes.
People will point out this all started because of the Krauss-Weber test, and then the test that came out of it looks nothing like the Krauss-Weber test. Certainly an interesting observation. I'm not saying the Krauss-Weber test is perfect or that it should have been modeled off of the Krauss-Weber test, but it is interesting that that's where all this came from, and then we just kind of went a totally different direction. The first iteration of the test was pull-ups, sit-ups, standing broad jump, shuttle run, 50-yard dash, and the softball throw. And then I believe the 600-yard run was added within a year or two after that as the final of the original events.
Weren't there, maybe I was looking at a different version, but there were like 3 optional aquatic events. I could not find anything.
No, it's in there. They recommended a bunch of aquatic events. They were never widely implemented because of lack of access to pools.
Well, and that's what I saw that as well, which was that you have the events you just listed off, but there's a lot of freedom given to schools to like. So for folks that have been around for longer, you probably remember doing like rope climbs and stuff. That was never because that was mandated. It's just because your gym happened to have a rope.
So I'm going to go off for a second here because Drew is currently quoting a podcast from like 5 years ago that he recommended I listen to. And it was not the first time I listened to the podcast, and we can link it in the show notes here. I don't remember the name of it. You can look it up and give them a shout out. But I will say
maintenance phase.
I think the comment he just made about rope climbs and they go into wall sits and other things.
Yeah, wall sits
is arguably where I thought that podcast was the most off base and just like saying shit for no reason. Because there's never been, as far as I know, a requirement that schools implemented the presidential fitness test. And there would certainly never be a requirement that the only physical things you test kids on in physical education were the events of the presidential fitness test. Sure. So like, yeah, the rope climb has never been a part of the presidential fitness test. Yes, lots of kids did rope climbs in physical education. That's not because people thought it was part of the presidential fitness test. That's just because like climbing a rope is a physical skill.
That's a great point. Like I said, maintenance phase, they have a good episode, older episode on the fitness test, but like I was texting you about beforehand, it's pretty clear that, and I don't know these hosts, but they have some unresolved trauma around fitness testing.
Yeah, as we're talking, I'm going to stick in a couple of notes to myself here and say that I need to link to the maintenance phase episode.
And we'll have we'll have the Dr. East episode we mentioned.
Yep.
Rob Wilkins.
I'm also going to link to a Vox article. If you don't want to listen to the whole maintenance phase thing, the Vox article is a good example of like where all the hate for this test comes from. I'm going to be 100% clear. I do not agree with the Vox article.
What do they say?
It's an even more negative version of all of the unresolved trauma you hear in the maintenance phase episode.
It's like, I mean, so, and again, we're rehashing things we said before we were recording, but when you get into some of the research around the presidential fitness test, but I think more broadly, like youth fitness testing, there is a subsection of that research that is interesting, but you can see how it would quickly spiral, which is to say that exposure to testing creates negative relationships to fitness. I could see a case to be made for that, of course, but like you and I are both fit people. We're surrounded by fit people. I'm kind of partial towards the idea of a fitness test because I could see the goodness. However,
this is where I bring to the table a perspective that's like, I would argue a little tiny bit unique in the human performance space. I think a lot of people who end up in this field grew up fit, athletic, into these kinds of things.
We were born in it.
I only did sports growing up because my parents forced me to.
You merely adopted the fitness.
And I didn't even really necessarily do like sports that much. Like I did in like elementary school, I think I played basketball for like one season, and the problem was I would pass the ball to whoever my friends were, whether they were on my team or the other team.
It's not a good strategy.
Never really got it.
So you're saying is you're a nerd.
Yeah, a NARP, I believe would be the...
I learned that term the other day. That's a fit NARP, non-athletic.
I'm shocked that you didn't know that until recently.
I think I knew it and forgot about it. Just, non-athletic regular person for people.
My youth athletic journey, like the main features of it were like being forced to go to youth soccer by my parents and like probably being pretty upset about it every single time they dragged me there. Like brief stints of like t-ball and
So
basketball.
you're Billy Elliot,
a
basically.
a decent amount of karate. Did that for a few years, and then ultimately ended up. I think I did tumbling when I was a kid, so like before it became gymnastics.
You're for
Everybody does a little
sure
bit of that.
Billy Elliot.
And for my high school era, it was cross country, and that was because that was a no cut sport at my high school. Like as long as you could run 3 miles in under 30 minutes, you could be on the team.
I was running.
I think there were 100 people on the cross country team. I was not on the varsity squad. I competed in the open category when we went to races. I was faster as like just a lieutenant in the Army than I was as a high school kid. So like bringing this back, I was one of the kids who was not athletic and like didn't look forward to gym class necessarily. And that there were weird niche things that I was decent at that I enjoyed, but like anything that was sportsy, I was very bad at. But like we're gonna go on a sidebar here and say you'll hear these podcasts and these articles talking about how ridiculous it is to do it like quantified and rack and stack people and publicly embarrass people in front of their classmates. You would never say that about academics. Academics, every single thing you do is quantitatively assessed, and then you're ranked and you're told what your score is, and it determines what college you go to, and it determines what jobs you get later in life, and we're racking and stacking people constantly.
That's a good point.
If anything, going through high school as a nerd who like sucked at gym class but was awesome in classrooms, like it almost only seems fair that like once in a while we recognize the performance of people who have different talents.
Give the jocks their moment.
Like I got recognition all the time for academic excellence. Like the athletes got less.
I wonder if that's because that narrative fits, and we're probably pissing a lot of people off, to be fair, but that narrative fits into this whole idea of like the bully is the jock and the victim is the nerd, and like that's physically related. And
well, I think actually there's an awesome opportunity to address this coming up. I don't want to get out ahead of it, but he's already agreed. If anybody follows Zach Tellender on Instagram, he's a pretty big like in the fitness influencer space now, a lot of Olympic lifting content recently, a lot more cardio. He and I were in the same high school class, and he was a jock and I was a nerd. So in a few weeks here, we will get to like rehash.
They're going to fight, guys.
He's going to shove me in a locker.
And they're going to fight.
Mora, what's up, nerd?
So we'll see. We'll get to revisit this in a few weeks when we record that one.
So anyway, John F. Kennedy comes around in the 60s.
Yeah, back on track with the history of how we got here.
Back on track. Team, this episode of Mops and Moes is brought to you by Train Heroic. Train Heroic is a reliable, well-designed platform for programming, tracking, and communicating with athletes. If you've been with us for any length of time, you will know that Train Heroic is the platform that we use to power our own training, long and strong, which you can find at our website, mopsandmoes.com. If you're looking for a solid platform to support your own coaching, whether it's your full-time role or a side hustle, Train Heroic is definitely worth checking out. You can use the link in any of our show notes, you can find it in our newsletter, or you can head to our website, mopsandmoes.com/training to get your first week for free.
We covered the events of the original test. They stayed basically the same for a while. They implemented a little bit more distance running. Like I mentioned, they tried to implement aquatic events, but it didn't really go anywhere, which like arguably making sure kids can swim would have like a huge public health positive impact in terms of preventing drownings. And it's a form of exercise you can do with almost any injury history.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was another thing too. And you probably picked this up on the Maintenance Phase podcast. They talked a little bit about it, but like there's an emphasis on, I don't want to say gym specific movements, but certainly not an emphasis on other things that would promote health, like being outside, fishing, running, swimming, climbing. I don't know. I mean, it evolves over time.
That's probably coming from a place of field expediency, right?
For sure. Exactly.
We were willing to spend roughly $0 on this whole effort.
Even though it's a crisis.
So we're not able, like, you can look in the comments on my Instagram post about the presidential fitness test coming back, and like, I didn't wade into those comments. I've been trying to post and ghost and stuff, but like, if your argument is that like my school doesn't have pull-up bars, you're just kind of like publicly announcing that like we invest nothing in physical education.
Yeah, if you don't have any
Nothing.
horizontal, you have monkey bars. It's the same thing.
Guys, come on.
Did you ever take one of these?
A presidential fit. I know I've taken.
I did a mile
I think so.
run. I don't
Because
remember.
I definitely did the pacer test. Well, let's save it until we get to the.
Sorry, back to Kennedy, 1960s.
Yeah, we'll get to the era that we were in a little bit.
Yes.
And this is another useful sidebar. Lore of Mops and Moes.
This is how we met, sort of.
Yeah. So Drew and I met when I was hosting like a professional development series for the Army Physical Fitness School during COVID, and we couldn't do anything, so we did all
We
these
were online
Teams-based.
dating for a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But not long after that, and I think this was around the time I was leaving active duty. I think I kind of had the idea that I was going to be working H2F things.
I was at Bragg when this happened.
So I left Fort Jackson where I was, cruised up the East Coast. I think actually, yeah, that's about right. I was going to my CSP, and for people who are not in the know, if you're separating from active duty, you can do this internship as you separate to help you ease into your civilian career. Mine was in DC. So I cruised from Fort Jackson up to DC, and along the way I stopped at Fort Bragg to just like introduce myself and chat with some of the brand new H2F folks getting these programs established. At this point, it was like hit or miss whether people even had like offices or spaces to train soldiers or anything. But Drew was one of the lucky ones. Drew did have an office.
I did have an office.
I walked into it and noticed, well, we talked about a few different textbooks first. I think it was extremely nerdy. But Drew did have a copy of the 1960 John F. Kennedy article, The Soft American.
The Soft American.
We chatted about it because I'm mildly obsessed with that article. I took Drew's inspiration. I hadn't even thought about trying to acquire a physical copy of it for myself. People who are watching the video version of this podcast on Spotify or YouTube or whatever will be able to see right behind me. And this is actually the result of me destroying two different copies.
I was going to say, if you want to frame this, you have to buy two.
Yeah. So like, because it's on both sides of the page.
I learned that. Yes.
I had to acquire two copies of that issue of Sports Illustrated. It was astonishingly cheap.
Actually, they're very cheap. And I'll give folks, it's December of 1960 if you want to go on eBay and find it. I hate saying that out loud because I don't want people to take them all. But
the people looking at what's behind me, the frame cost more than both copies that went into that.
And it is, to be clear, you can also find this article online for free.
Yeah, you can just read it. Yeah.
There's a lovely pencil sketch of John F. Kennedy. Mm-hmm. The rest of the magazine, too, is actually pretty interesting. They did the Kennedy family did like a beach photo shoot.
Yep.
So
hanging out in the boat.
Yeah, you kind of flip through that, look at, that's what it looks like to live on East Egg.
And for context.
It's a great Gatsby reference, by the way.
There you go. Very cultured.
Yeah.
But JFK had at this point already been elected president, but not sworn in.
Hadn't sworn in.
And he had during the campaign or something, he had promised Sports Illustrated an article and he hadn't fulfilled that promise. So he went on this retreat to gather himself and figure out his plans and ideas before assuming the office of the president. And one of the things he did during that retreat was write this article.
Which basically says we're all soft and we're screwed and we're going to die.
There's going to be a lot of show notes on this article. So I'm also writing down that link to Soft American article.
Great article. Great
mandatory reading. It's really, really short. The whole article is this thing right behind me. It's only a couple pages. Mm-hmm. If you follow Mops and Moes and you have not read the Soft American, I think do push-ups.
You're soft. You're a soft American.
Should be a punishable offense. But pros and cons. I think the article is insightful. I think it addresses some real issues. I don't think JFK solved any of those issues. I think every one of those issues has gotten worse under essentially every president since then. None have taken real action to make impact on these problems.
We asked Rob about that.
We did. It's a tough one. The trend
hard to answer.
We haven't bent the curve on this one, right? Like it's getting worse, and it's arguably getting worse faster.
Well, we know why. It's because what we've said already, which is that we create a test, but we don't actually create change.
Yeah.
So it's the facade of,
Yep.
Anyway.
Next step, next evolution of the test. 1976, the softball throw was removed. Softball throw was primarily in there to simulate grenade throwing to prepare people for ground combat kind of stuff. We can debate in another episode the relevance of throwing to overall fitness, even if you're a non-thrower. Lots of coaches are super interested in the rotational and kinesthetic awareness components.
Watch the videos of when the CrossFit Games had a softball throw, and you will see some horrendous, like very fit people with horrendous form.
Nice.
So
yeah, 1976 they delete the softball throw from the test. The sit up got modified. Other distance options were added. Yeah, and then skipping forward even further, we start to see the more modern shift under Clinton and Bush, where the emphasis expanded or shifted from recognizing top performers to engaging kids at all levels. And that's an important one for what we hope to get out of a test like this.
We sort of glossed over Lyndon B. Johnson really quickly. So I'll just mention the impact he had, or the thing he added to this was that he created the Presidential Physical Fitness Award.
Yeah, that's an important step.
So now it became a thing that you were awarded for.
Which is important context for the Clinton-Bush transition, because the award, and I believe when they originally started it was top 15%, right?
This says, well, first he did a second national fitness survey of 10 to 17-year-olds, and then based on those results, he establishes the Presidential Physical Fitness Award for Exceptional Achievement by 10 to 17-year-old boys and girls. So it doesn't say. I think it was 85th percentile and above. Sure.
Whatever. Bottom line is the focus was recognizing high performers rather than helping low performers get better. And that's been a source of significant criticism for the test. And that's what Clinton and Bush were trying to address by like encouraging activity at all levels, helping guide the way people could improve if their scores were low. Frankly, the same thing we would do under an academic system, right? Like it is possible to both recognize high performers and guide interventions for people who need to improve.
Correct. And
they're not mutually exclusive.
Promise I am not going to go administration by administration. I will give this link to Alex so he can put in the show notes so you guys can see this. But I thought the Nixon administration did something interesting, which was that they created the Presidential Sports Award. So you have your fitness award. You also have your sports award. This, I guess, depending on how you read this, it basically added an additional emphasis towards more like team / group / from like an employment standpoint, like a public sector emphasis. So still an emphasis on individual physical aptitude, but now broadening the scope so much so that by the time Gerald Ford rolls around 1976, there's a Presidential Sports Award in 43 different categories. So
yeah, and that tends to happen when we don't have like a structured program. Yeah, it's an issue. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting, and we'll return to the idea of like health versus performance. But some people are critical of like being good at sports is not the same as fitness. And we want to encourage just like overall fitness, not just athleticism. But it's really, really hard to draw the line between those two things. There's no clear barrier when it switches from health to performance. And if you look at any of the data for like maintaining health throughout a lifetime, the way people tend to do that is by being involved in something that would be categorized as sports throughout their life. It doesn't have to be team contact sports, but like finding a sport you enjoy that you do socially with other people that keeps you physically active is a common denominator for most people who stay fit.
Yes. And sort of a random point here, and I'll give a shout out to the maintenance phase because they mentioned this, but we've gone through several decades now of history, implementation of different types of tests, adjustments to the tests, yada, yada, yada. I was not able to find, I don't know if you were, they don't actually do anything with any of these results. So it's not like,
and this is a thing Drew and I disagree on a little bit. We're gonna hash this out live right now.
That's fine, but just really quickly, think of something like the Army fitness test or any of the other branches. Like you do the thing, your scores get put into a thing. It's like, and then ideally, changes happen. I mean, that's why we see H2F becoming a thing. So the same cause and effect does not seem to happen, despite, again, the fact that this is a national security crisis. So let's argue.
So yeah, here's my disagreement, and I will disagree in both the context of the presidential fitness test and the context of the APFT, ACFT, and now AFT
Do
for
I
the
know
Army.
what we're
Yeah, I'll get there.
Was
I'll
I
get
read
there.
in on this, or is this live?
You're saying they don't do anything with the results.
Sure.
So I'll rant my Army rant real quick, and then we'll come back to the fitness test, which is to say, there's a nearly identical sentence at the very beginning of the instructions that were read for the APFT from the time I joined the Army, the ACFT once that got implemented, and it's still in the language for the AFT now. And it says, and I'm not going to get it word for word because I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but it says your results will be used by you and your leadership to determine your physical training needs, right? And I've asked people before how many people got feedback from somebody in their leadership on what their results say they should be doing in terms of physical training. Like, you performed well here, you did poorly here, you should work on this kind of thing. Here's some guidance for your PT. Almost nobody ever gets that guidance, right? So despite it being like right at the beginning of instructions, leadership never follows through on leveraging the results to help people interpret them in most cases. I would argue that's something junior leaders should be able to do. We should be able to provide them the very basic level of education necessary to interpret the results and do something with them. In fact, behind the curtain for a second, we, Mops and Mo's, with the help of Drew's former colleague, Nick, have been experimenting around with a tool where you can punch in your results and get feedback that assigns you like an archetype and what kind of training you should do and help you understand it. Yeah, we're working on it. Not ready to go live yet, but that is like in progress. Nick, I know I haven't sent you an email yet. I owe you one about how
hopefully
we can,
by the time this comes out, we have emailed him back.
Hopefully. It'd be really awkward if he's like, he and I have been messaging back and forth on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'll get the email back to him. We're in communication. But I think we can like refine a little bit the language it spits out and make it a really useful tool to solve that episode or that issue a little bit of how the results are never interpreted for people. Bringing it back to the presidential fitness test, I think, like, yes, under the FitnessGram, which we'll get to in a second, there's some like automatically generated forms that give you recommendations for how to train. I would argue a core responsibility of physical education teachers is to interpret these things for kids so they understand it. Like, listen, we're going to take the presidential fitness test in 2 weeks. Like, here's the things you're going to do. Here's how you could prepare for those things. Hey guys, we took the presidential fitness test last week. Your scores are in front of you. Here's how to interpret them. Here's how you could exercise to improve on these. Like, that's not, like, I feel like people are expecting the government to like spoon feed us everything. And it's always going to suck when it comes from like a standardized government resource. I don't want to get ahead of myself and start talking about like the forms that come out when you punch in FitnessGram results under the last few years version of the test. But like, when you say the criticism is nothing was ever done with the results, I blame physical education, like the lack of quality physical education in this country for that. Because it is not that hard to like look at a kid's scores and give the kid some advice.
Am I supposed to disagree with that?
That's what you just said. You just said the criticism was nothing was ever done with the scores.
I'm saying it I go back to my point, which was that, like, again, the language around this being absolutely critical. We care about our kids, et cetera, but there's no policy changes around better school food, funding for physical education.
Yeah,
I agree with
fair.
you I agree with you. The solution is for a well-educated, well-resourced PE coach or teacher to but that doesn't exist. And so you're right. I don't think the government should come in with a whistle and say, all right, kids, we're running sprints today. But I mean, just some quick stats, like right now, only 6%, no, 9% of middle school kids have to take PE. 15% of elementary school kids. Only 6 states require PE. So for sure, PE is the answer. But it's not.
Yeah, we have to invest in quality PE.
We have
to attract good candidates. Yeah.
And this is not a knock against STEM. I think STEM is fantastic, but we have very clearly divested from physical education to invest towards STEM because of the kind of attitude towards testing these days, all this kind of stuff. Like, we have to rack and stack against these other countries in all these STEM categories. But meanwhile, we're super fat. We suck.
Which, for what it's worth, is a classic measures of performance versus measures of effectiveness problem.
Yes.
More time sitting in classrooms staring at STEM related things does not necessarily improve STEM scores. One thing we know improves STEM scores is being healthier and fitter in general, getting more physical activity per day, maintaining a healthy body composition, eating a healthy diet, getting a good night's sleep. like lots of things that could be addressed in health and physical education classes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not as like one for one. Like instead of being a measure of performance thing where we can measure like hours of time invested in the thing, it's a measure of effectiveness situation where we like look at the intervention and measure an outcome. And we're not as good at that typically.
We need to do a whole, I don't know if people would care or not, but like an episode around the state of PE in school. I mean, just like quickly, this is 2016. On average, how much do you think on average schools spend annually on PE programs?
Oh, I don't think I even want to know.
$764. That's insane. And I'm not
like, is that per student though?
No, per school.
No way.
$764.
Oh God.
That's a Time magazine article. Granted, 2016, so roughly 10 years ago. But it just gives you, and who knows, maybe that's a little bit off, but like the point is, that's a 3 number, like that's hundreds of dollars. I'm not this is a touchy subject for folks, like the whole No Child Left Behind idea, but there are some that will tell you, and I know this came up in that other podcast, but that shift away from PE type stuff towards standardized testing is the end all be all, is where we see this degradation of resources towards physical education. So
yeah,
I know this was meant to be a debate and we totally took it off the rails. I think we agree on the same core point, which is that the answer is for somebody, a coach or a teacher, to receive the results and say, hey, here's what we're going to do about this. But if you're only spending $764, there's probably not even a coach to have that conversation with. So anyway.
I will, before we move on, I'll just, since Drew didn't use it and it's a great line and he put it in the notes document, I'm going to steal it. And his line in here is they're basically testing kids once a year on how to read, showing them they suck at reading, and then telling them to come back in a year to find out they suck at reading again.
Yeah.
So like, yes, we need to improve that. Like something needs to be done, but I think that's not like, it's like not as direct a thing. It shouldn't be like you take the test, it gets punched into a data system. The system gives you instructions for how to fix yourself. I think it's investing in health and physical education.
Do we? I haven't been in elementary school in a long time, or middle school or high school. But when you take tests, like you're sort of, your kind of academic trajectory is sort of dictated on your like strengths and weaknesses academically, right?
A little bit.
So it's interesting to me that we don't, and I know we're kind of beating a dead horse at this point, but like we don't do that same thing towards fitness. I mean, it would be cool in addition to like all the, what if there's a physical component to the SAT? That'd be pretty cool.
I will shout out, I'll tell two, like, people are going to hate me for this, but like West Point stories, because I think the Department of Physical Education there does some pretty cool work.
What?
But one, in my freshman year, may have been my sophomore year, we were taking a class on like leading unit physical training. It was either fundamentals of individual training or like, because you have to go through several classes there. It was either the one for like individual physical training or unit physical training. Don't remember which. But the instructor asked people in the class to raise their hand if they had physical education in high school at all. And only like half the class raised their hand. And then he like said, keep your hand up if it was like at least 2 days a week. And like a bunch more hands went down, and it was like, keep your hand up if it was at least 3 days a week. Bunch more hands went down, and like at a certain point, only my hand is still up. And he's like, "Oh, you're from Illinois," and I didn't realize how bad the situation had gotten across the country, and that like Illinois was one of the holdouts on like maintaining like even a reasonable level of public school physical education requirement. That was a little shocking. But as a separate thing, and I know you can't do this at civilian educational institutions, although I will try and dig up a slide I have on like how many colleges required some sort of physically active course over time. The number has plummeted. It used to be a common thing in college that you had to take some physical courses.
We had to.
But for like new cadets arriving at West Point, you take some physical assessments during your like quote unquote basic training, and how you perform on those assessments determines what level of a few different classes you're slotted into throughout the next few years. So like your swimming ability determines what level of swimming course you get put into, things like that. And I think something like that, I know like this, we're talking about like a much higher degree of both time and resource investment compared to what public school physical education looks like now. But if there was like an initial intake assessment when you began middle school or when you began high school,
It'd be sick.
and like how you performed determined which kind of physical education you got and what it was oriented towards and how nice they were to you and things like that. Like maybe we could address some of these concerns about public shaming and whether it's being used to actually help improve kids' outcomes.
Okay, so this, we're going to put a pin in this because this has now become an additional side quest. So, team, you well know that we're looking for, by we, I mean somebody who does fitness on submarines. A second layer now is going to be somebody at a very high level who has some understanding of curriculum.
Curriculum for physical education, though, right?
Well, yeah. It's one of these things, and I know I don't have all the facts. I cannot for the life of me understand why, given all that we know about the benefits of exercise, especially in kids, why we would consistently defund and just take these things away. I mean, is there my only guess is that there has
I know a little bit about this.
Is there an assumption that these kids are just going to figure it out? What's the reasoning?
It comes from something much simpler. And this isn't necessarily the reason for the defunding, but it is the reason for the de-emphasis
Lack
on
of
this.
Emphasis, sure.
It comes from, and I will point people towards the La Sierra High School physical education content you can find in the Motivation Factor documentary.
Let's do, you know what, team? Here's what your next Friday night's going to look like. Get yourself some ice cream, dip it in sprinkles while you read the Soft American. Once you finish that, go watch the La Sierra documentary. That'd be a hell of a night.
It's not free, so you will have to pay like $5 or something, but it's worth it.
It's worth it.
Anyway, they address why that program went away, which is the same reason a lot of programs have been de-emphasized across the country. Do you have any theories? Like, if you've watched the documentary, I'm going to guess
it has something to do with shirtless kids running around, basically bullying each other into getting fitter.
Indirectly, yes. It came from parents complaining about how it made their kids feel. Like, my kid got embarrassed and I'm mad, so I'm going to complain. And like that doesn't seem to happen in academic stuff. Like, there are kids who struggle academically. Their parents don't come to the school and like yell at administrators.
Well, it's almost like you're expected to struggle, and the struggle is part of the growth. Like, we reward kids who struggle and then succeed, versus if you struggle in fitness, we'll just take you away from fitness and find this other thing.
Never have you get exposed to things that challenge you. Yeah,
exactly. And maybe that's because there's a physical component and like you might get a boo-boo. I don't know. But man, we're circling a meteor crater-sized rabbit hole of interesting.
Well, I'm going to try and find a quote that I used in an article a while back about how the military should like stick to enforcing higher fitness standards. I'll quote myself for a second, and it's going to be a little bit presumptuous because it's going to be a discussion of parenting, and I'm not a parent. So once I finish quoting myself, I'll hand it over to Drew for his perspective as an actual parent. But there is a concept called bulldozer parenting. People have heard of helicopter parenting. This is bulldozer parenting. It refers to parents who knock down every obstacle for their children before they get a chance to struggle. While their intent is good, what is meant to protect their children from short-term harm, there is, in fact, like peer-reviewed scholarly literature that shows that it ultimately results in psychologically fragile children, fearful and avoidant of failure, with never learned coping strategies and poor resilience. I used it in the context of that article to argue that sometimes we bulldozer parent our soldiers in the Army. If they struggle with something, we take that away because we don't want failure to happen. But sometimes failure is an important part of developing resilience. And now I'll shut up since I'm not a parent and let an actual parent talk about how that is kind of hard to do.
Thank you. I welcome as a representative of parents everywhere. It's super hard to do, especially because you sit there, and granted, my daughter's 4, so I'm in the toddler phase where everything's adorable and cute. Like, you want to remove all the obstacles. What ends up happening is you get this competing dialogue in your head of like, I know what I should do. I should not get in the way. You know, I should not do the bulldozer thing or the helicopter thing or the tiger parenting or there's a bajillion different archetypes depending on what book you read. But in the moment, it's hard. Probably why so many parents are in therapy. But yes, I agree with you. I know we've talked about that before with the bulldozer parenting thing. What I fear as my 4-year-old gets older is when you do start to interact, or you do start to get the kind of social dynamic and the bullying and the this, that. And I will tell you, as like a parent who tends to catastrophize, I have already had those scenarios in my head of like, what am I going to do when somebody tells her they don't like her hair? Well, I'm going to kill them, obviously. So yeah, shout out parents out there. Remember, guys, don't get a dad bod. Train for the father figure.
Damn it, Drew.
Where are we at with fitness
moving on?
tests?
Let's get back on track. I do think that actually transitions us nicely to roughly 2012.
Well, I should say I have administered physical fitness tests to my 4-year-old, specifically the La Sierra standard. So if you've seen that documentary, you will know that my 4-year-old.
Your 4-year-old doing.
Absolutely.
Okay, sure.
We live on a lake. I'm not above throwing her in, learning how to swim. All of those are jokes, by the way. Anyway, where were we?
Back on track. Fast forward a little bit. We're in 2012 now. This is the time frame where, if you take the internet at face value, the presidential fitness test went away. I would argue that there was a rebranding that happened and a reorientation, and there was still a presidential fitness test-like program going on. But as we will discuss, it's much more about the vibes than the events of the test.
There was a presidential fitness emphasis.
Yeah, so it changed names. It became the Presidential Youth Fitness Program. It's pretty well acknowledged that a driving force for getting rid of the presidential fitness test and the associated award for high performance on it was the embarrassment it caused for less fit kids. They acknowledge that. So we get into the whole resilience development thing. The Presidential Youth Fitness Program, or PYFP, and I'm going to use their language for a second. The PYFP utilizes a new form of calculations, placing students within ranges and removing the award for achieving the highest category. Instead, students are provided with individual assessments and goals, along with a structured approach to achieving them. Sounds great. What events were included in this new program? They rely on the Fitnessgram, comes from the Cooper Institute, really widely used stuff. There's different categories. So there's aerobic, body composition, muscular strength, muscular endurance, and flexibility. For aerobic, this is where the pacer test was. I took lots of pacer tests. That is one of the options. You can also do the 1 mile run and the 1 mile walk. For body composition, you can do like regular height, weight, BMI stuff. They also have options for like skin fold caliper. I'm pretty sure nobody was skin fold calipering me in like middle school or high school.
I was gonna say, that's a lawsuit.
I'm not even sure they were tracking my height and weight in the context of physical education. Like the doctor certainly was, but I don't think my PE teacher was like weighing me and measuring my height or anything. It's in there. It's part of Fitnessgram, and you can go as deep as you want. I'll include a link to some of the Fitnessgram resources, but the instructor gets to choose what events are done. Like none of them are mandatory. You just like pick the ones you're going to use. It generates a test. You can log kids in. They can create accounts, whatever. For muscular strength and endurance, there's a bunch of things. Curl up, trunk lift, push up, flexed arm hang, modified pull up. And then for flexibility, you have the sit and reach and the shoulder stretch. Frankly, as I look at those, not that different from the presidential fitness test.
Not that different from the very first one we looked at, which was the Krauss-Weber.
Yeah.
Like an interesting amalgamation of stretchiness and body weight. Yes.
I will, because I'll forget it if we don't address it at this point, but both for Fitnessgram and for the original stuff, what I have read, and people can chime in and let me know if I'm wrong here, but the sit and reach doesn't really like predict anything in terms of outcomes. More flexibility is not necessarily better. You need the flexibility necessary to get into the range of motions of the activities you do. So it's kind of like a bell curve of how much is good. We've like wildly over-indexed on flexibility as a scored fitness thing over the last few decades.
And pull-ups are a better indicator of body composition than upper body strength, which I think is fascinating. And one of the reasons why we should do them in the military. But I digress.
And bottom line, to interpret it all, like you punched into a system and it shows kids where they score within their demographic, age, gender, grade, stuff like that, like what percentile they're in. Are they doing great? Are they a little bit behind? Stuff like that. It does pump out some recommendations based on their results, and if they're scored in the actual FitnessGram system year over year, you can also track their progression or regression over time, like whether they're getting better, whether they're getting worse, and like look at all that kind of stuff. But regardless, it does create some like recommendations. But I looked in the system and I played with it a little bit, and the recommendations are kind of dumb and like a little bit insulting to the intelligence of like physical education teachers and possibly the kids themselves. Like if you have like a bad push-up score, the recommendation that comes out is like, to improve your upper body strength, be sure that your strength activities include modified push-ups, and climbing activities. You may need to do more arm exercises. Cool, FitnessGram, thanks. Or like if you get a bad core muscular endurance score, to improve your abdominal strength, be sure that your strength activities include curl-ups. You may need to do more curl-ups each day or do them more days of the week. Thanks, FitnessGram. Like, if I do sit-ups, I'll get more sit-ups.
Is there a little FitnessGram mascot? I haven't looked.
There's like a symbol. I don't think it's a mascot.
There's not like a little fuzzy sponge with a thumbs up or something?
I found the report that comes out awfully similar to what comes out when you do an in-body test. It's like the same kind of like charts and like the way it's arranged and things like that. It feels very, very similar.
Supposed to.
It's pretty weird. Like it's not. It like distills coaching into like, oh, you did bad at push-ups, so you should probably do push-ups more often. Oh, you did bad at sit-ups, so you should do sit-ups more often.
And this gets to a point I made at the very beginning, which
gets into Goodhart's law pretty bad, but
sure. But there's this mythology around the idea of fitness testing being good just because it is good. The whole FitnessGram thing, like there is very little, if any, critical analysis of FitnessGram, and I have not spent a lot of time looking at FitnessGram as a whole concept. I'm sure I will encounter it soon. Like I said, I have a 4-year-old. But you would hope that if this like ubiquitous methodology that's being implemented nationwide, you would want there to be critical analysis of that to obviously tighten it up, to introduce some alternatives, et cetera. All the reasons why we do good research. There just isn't that when it comes to FitnessGram. So for better or for worse, but just a fact, there is not much critical analysis of FitnessGram.
So I think at this point, we've been talking for an hour. I think we are going to go long on this episode because we got some things to discuss before we break.
This is groundbreaking stuff, guys. Hang on.
So at this point, we have a bunch of notes on like who is on. So this brings us to present day. President Trump signs an executive order, reestablishes the President's Fitness Council, gives it some guidance. That guidance includes reestablishing the presidential fitness test, the award, all these challenges, things like that. We covered that at the top. You guys have seen all the headlines, yada, yada. I don't want to spend a bunch of time on like the politics of who's on the council, but I think we can spend a second on that.
They're dumb. They're all dumb.
It's who knows if it's dumb or not. They're all associated with professional sports.
Here, I'll rattle these off.
I think there is one. Actually, that's not true. I think there's one doctor on the team.
Is there? Okay, we have Bryson DeChambeau, golf buddy. Yep. Harrison Butker, kicker for the Chiefs. Also, fun fact, number 3 on the NFL's list of sexiest players. He is a good-looking dude. Paul Triple H Levesque. I'm assuming this is Triple H, the wrestler. Triple H.
Yes.
Annika Sorenstam, again, golfer. Roger Goodell, NFL commissioner. It's weird. Nick Bosa, also a football player, tight end, I believe. Tony Romo, retired quarterback, Cowboys. Lawrence Taylor, this one's fun. I'm going to use your words. Incredible athlete, controversial, cocaine, in jail 3 times for drugs, registered sex offender. Do you want to read his quote or do you want me to?
I'll read the quote because the quote astonished me.
The quote is fantastic.
This came from the press conference where this executive order is being announced. LT is standing at the mic in front of President Trump and says, "I'm just proud to be on this team. I don't know why. I don't know what we're supposed to be doing, but I'm here to serve and I'm here to serve you. So I'm going to do the best I can for as long as I can."
Listen, I can't bash LT too much because as a fellow Tar Heel, he is nasty at football. But hell of a quote. Tua Tagovailoa, I always say his name wrong. Quarterback for the Dolphins. Saquon Barkley. This one's fun. He's not actually on the council. But they've said he's on the council?
He got announced as being on the council at the press conference, and some people followed up with him during like a separate, unrelated press conference and asked him about it. And he said his team was approached about it a few months ago, but he said no.
Said no.
And it's worth noting this list of names. I had to go to like a bunch of different sources to compile this list of names because they're like the website for the President's Council hasn't been updated. There's no like one-stop shop to get a lot of this information. You just have to get it from like the collected questions that reporters have asked. Yeah.
So where were we? To Saquon, by the way, phenomenal running back. Wayne Gretzky, hockey player, also Canadian. Matthew Tkachuk, also hockey player. Gary Bettman, I don't know this one. Where is he from?
I think he might be NHL administrator type.
Okay.
Sports executive, serves as the commissioner of the NHL.
Interesting. Mariano Rivera, phenomenal closing pitcher for the Yankees. Don't know if he's an expert on physical fitness for youth. And I believe that concludes.
There is one other. I missed it. I had to go hunt for this down. I was right. There is a name that has been mentioned that is a physician, like a doctor who's on the team. Stephen Soloway is a New Jersey physician who served on the President's Council in Trump's first term. I don't know whether he is going to be on the council, but it's like a pretty safe assumption since he was at the press conference when this was announced.
Interesting. I would love, I'm not going to do it right now because it would take a while. I would love to calculate the entire net worth of that whole council. That is a wealthy bunch of folks.
It's also, in my opinion, a little bit short on people who have like made their careers about helping other people get healthy and fit. It's mostly about people who have made their careers on getting themselves healthy and fit. Mm-hmm. I don't have like a good reference for this. I just heard this. Don't know if it's true. Heard that Lawrence Taylor like refused to participate in strength and conditioning stuff because he did it like one season and it didn't make him any better. So he said, screw that. Like he's like an incredibly physical human. Like well known for like strength and physicality, but like supposedly he wasn't that into like exercise. He was just into running people over.
Yeah. Fun fact: Bill Belichick, his defensive coordinator, at one point commented on his quote disregard for his body. So you could take that to mean that he was a freak on the field, and he was, or that he didn't train in the traditional. Anyway, the point is. I'm sure these people are great. I'm sure they're well-intentioned. Let's be real. These are not the folks that should be making decisions about how we should better the physical fitness of our kids.
If their first directive is to design a new presidential fitness test, I feel like there could be some other people involved. And like hopefully they're seeking out those experts. I have some hope still.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Like what has the council done, you know?
Well, so and this is where we get to like criticize people of all political stripes. Sure. There was a President's Council under the previous administration, under President Biden, and they didn't really do anything either.
When has the President's Council done anything? Might be a better question.
It's true. I was a little salty under the last. Like they announced that Steph Curry was on the President's Council, and that was pretty exciting. And he could have brought a lot of attention to it. The first and last mention of Steph Curry being on the President's Council was when he was announced as being on the President's Council. That was it. It was over.
Who was the first chair? It'll be Eisenhower's Presidential Fitness Council. You know who it was?
Didn't they put Nixon in charge of it?
Yeah, it was Nixon.
Yeah.
So
but then he stepped away because other stuff was happening, and I forget who they put in.
Shane McCarthy was the executive director. Point being, we have a track record of appointing the wrong kind of people. And then you have this comment here, which I did not realize, but the executive director is a 26-year-old with a bachelor's in English.
I think she played like lacrosse or field hockey or something at University of Michigan. Graduated in 2000.
What?
Has a bachelor's degree in English. Yeah.
How did she get this?
That's a great question. It's an extremely valid question. I would love to know too.
Rayhan Marani? No.
Nope. You're gonna have to give me a second. I'll have to open another.
I'm curious how one gets appointed. And again, I want to make this very clear, team. We have had folks on here who have been on the Presidential Fitness Council. They are great people.
Catherine Granito is her name.
Catherine, if you are listening, both Alex and myself want to know, in the spirit of Lawrence Taylor, what are you supposed to be doing? What are you? What are you guys supposed to be doing? Because if we just want to say like, hey gang, let's get together, have a good time, take some pictures and like, cool. But like kids are getting fat and we should be doing something about that. So, if you, whether you like President Trump or you don't, loves an executive order, he could probably executive order some stuff that could solve for some of these issues. And my thought would be that if he and Bryson are playing golf together and Bryson's on the council and he gives a shit, maybe they could have a conversation about like, hey dude, could you just, executive order some stuff to like fix some of these things? But as we've said, and then I'll get off my pedestal, the whole idea of the presidential fitness test and by extension the council is instead of making change, let's just create more tests. So what else?
We'll try and move through the rest of this relatively quickly. One last anecdote, and then I think we're going to hash out a few questions and then wrap this up. One thing that I found interesting, if you like go online and try to look up President's Council stuff, you're going to find everything at the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion.
Mm-hmm.
That is where the President's Council used to fall. Like administratively, they kept track of them. They provided administrative support to them. They have some staff there. I reached out to a friend who works there, works with the council. I reached out on the day that like this press conference was happening and asked like anything to share. And she said, no, we're learning about this the same way you are from the news. So it seems like the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion has been cut out of this thing. The executive director for the council, that position used to sit at ODPHP, I'm pretty sure. It appears to now sit at the White House directly. So unclear what that will mean for like administration as to how it ties in with HHS and different public health efforts that it would seemingly be plugged in with.
I'm reading some of the official publications from the White House, and based on everything we just talked about, the language around some of these things is borderline hilarious. Just
got
really,
anything for us, or should we move on to some questions?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, the presidential fitness test is a time-honored tradition, blah, 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 inspired millions of American children. No, it hasn't. Served as the gold standard for youth physical fitness across the country for generations. Also not true. But anyway, what are facts? What are facts? Let's close with some questions.
This is the toughest one. This we could make a whole episode out of. Probably we're gonna have to keep it concise.
What would an ideal presidential fitness test look like?
Yeah, what's the perfect presidential fitness test?
Man, I'm partial. Well, if we remove the whole bullying thing from the equation, I'm very partial towards the way La Sierra had their stuff set up.
The tiers
the tiers, but also the movements. And I say that because sure there's goodness in some of the flexibility things. That's fine. But when I hear the word test, I think more of like events, and I like the aquatic component, whatever that looks like. And La Sierra was treading water, which I thought was good for 2 hours,
and has like a clear public health tie-in
for sure. We talked about pull-ups. I think that there are a lot, and I'm not dodging the question, but we've answered this somewhat when we've talked about military PT tests for the same reasons, which is that you can have events that are good events in and of themselves, but then also tell you a lot of things second and third order. For example, the pull-up gives me, if somebody can do a pull-up, it gives me a good indication that their body weight is probably under control as well. So I would have an aerobic component, whatever that looks like, aquatic component, a calisthenic component, some sort of skill-based thing like a rope climb. And then fuck it, throw in like a double body weight deadlift and just let the kids go crazy. Why not? What would you have on yours? I don't know if I answered the question.
I'll preface this by saying establishing youth physical fitness standards in particular is really hard because kids' strength to weight ratios fluctuate wildly up to and through puberty, which like really messes up like specific standards. But I do like having an aerobic event, like something that requires running for an extended period of time, is probably the most field expedient thing for that. Despite some of the articles and podcasts we've mentioned that like they always mention the pull-up as like a public shaming thing where you just like make people look bad. But like, I think Americans should be able to do pull-ups. I think
start with a
healthy
static
humans.
hang. I mean, start with when they're
dead
young,
hang,
like
fine.
make them dead hang. Start them young.
And I again, I'm not a parent, haven't taken kids through this journey, but lots of friends who are parents, like you can have kids hanging from stuff surprisingly early. Like they have the strength to do that, and like keep them playing, keep them climbing over stuff, keep them doing monkey bars, have them like kids should be able to do that stuff. Adults should be able to do that stuff.
It's a literal evolutionary thing. Like if you have a child, the first thing they'll do is squeeze your hand. Like they're supposed to hang from stuff. So anyway.
So yeah, I don't think I have like my full list of events hashed out here. I probably would not include like barbells in a youth fitness thing that we're supposed to implement across the entire country.
Like, Beaverfit would love themselves a presidential fitness test contract.
I will say
pick 3 events.
I think push-ups are I think push-ups are overrated.
I'm with you on that.
I don't necessarily love those. Now you're gonna have me going back, because if we do like La Sierra, now we got like pegboard ascents. Pick up your classmate and carry them for a while.
Y'all, I'm just gonna say this, y'all. Google. I mean, you can get La Sierra. I know we talk about them a lot. You can get their PT or their PE handbook for free online. It's a PDF. You can print it off. The most insane physical fitness standards I have ever seen.
Yeah,
and they're
robust.
Middle schools. It was nuts.
Wasn't it high school?
High school, maybe, but I think back then high school kind of bridged.
Yeah, La Sierra High School Physical Education. That's what it was.
Okay, 3. You got to pick 3 events. Go. I'm gonna make us both do this.
Run
what?
I'll say. I'll Cooper test this one. 12-minute run as far as you can go, or something. No, that's too hard to grade for large groups, though.
Yeah,
either a mile or a mile and a half.
Just run a mile.
Something like that.
Just run a mile.
Sure, mile run. Pull-ups, and if you can't do pull-ups, either a flexed arm hang or a dead hang.
What if you did a like a, I don't know how you would do this, a max flex, like a max static hang, but every pull-up rep you did added 10 seconds to your total time.
Shout out.
Would that work?
Adam Whistler. I don't know if he listens or not. I will see him tomorrow morning, and we'll be running an event like this. He was playing around with like things like that. How do you incorporate both into the same test? It's a leg tuck / dead hang test. Each leg tuck you accomplish counts for a certain number of seconds.
Yeah.
And then once you can't do leg tucks anymore, you hang on the bar, and your score is how long you hang on the bar plus the number of seconds you get per leg tuck.
Right.
So it's like it's a combo event that incorporates both. And I think you could probably do something like that.
So you have us running a mile. You have us doing pull-ups.
And then a third event where we've addressed aerobic, we've addressed upper body strength / strength to width ratio / upper body pulling. We need some kind of lower body thing. Honestly, it's really hard to do because friction is really hard to standardize. So I don't want to do a sled based event. I was thinking of like higher and higher weights of sleds. And it's like the heaviest weight that you can get across a fixed distance within a reasonable amount of time. But that's just really prohibitive in terms of equipment, and friction is tough to standardize. Something lower body that doesn't require a ton of skill. Maybe the man lift and carry from La Sierra, where you pick up a classmate of a similar size and carry them for a fixed distance.
I would keep the mile. I would maybe do a rope climb instead of a pull-up, because I think you having a tested movement like a rope climb, again, just sort of creates there's a lot of positive trickle down.
It also incorporates a bunch of like kinesthetic awareness and physical literacy things.
And like a fear of heights, whatever.
Sure.
But then as you're talking about lower body strength, there's probably space here for kettlebells to be involved.
Ooh, not bad.
The downside to that is kettlebells, guys, came from Russia. And so I don't know if America's ready to stomach a national fitness test that includes a Russian-made product. So, I don't know, 20 kettlebell swings? Who knows?
Sure. If you have proposals, we have a form on the website to submit stuff if you want to recommend a youth fitness test. Otherwise, I think we move on to the next question. And I think we've hashed this one out to a decent degree at this point. this one is, what should PE teachers be expected to provide in a framework like this? I think we both kind of agree that they should be able to like coach kids through some physical literacy stuff, interpret their results, help guide them towards improvement, yada, yada. So the real question is not what should we expect from physical education teachers? The real question is, how do we invest in physical education to help make sure teachers are appropriately prepared, appropriately qualified, and appropriately resourced to run good programs?
Yeah, I think it is. It's naive. I know this wasn't the intent of the question, but it's almost naive to point the finger at the PE teachers and say, you need to level up and provide XYZ. I think the bigger issue is that we don't even have the mechanism to have a robust. I mean, I would love to see a world where like your physical education grade or whatever carries equal, if not more weight than all the other academic stuff. I think that would be super sick, and not just from like a jock standpoint, but literally from like a lifestyle. You'll be a better person if you're more physically capable. So,
and I think it will carry over to improved academic performance in the STEM stuff that everybody stresses about.
Exactly.
Okay. Next one, we may not have time to dive in deep. This is just my rant from earlier, but can you draw a clear line between health-based assessments and performance-based assessments? Because I think the events we just picked there, I think people would argue that like pull-up stuff is a performance-based assessment rather than predicting health outcomes. Although I would argue that if you did that study, you would probably find a lot of health-related outcomes associated with maintaining the body composition and strength required to do pull-ups. A mile run is a classic example of something that's like kind of both. Like VO2 max, everybody loves it now because it correlates so well with long-term health outcomes, all-cause mortality, stuff like that. I don't think there's a clear line. Like I think health and performance are on a spectrum. I haven't posted it in a while. Maybe it's time for me to bring back the illness, wellness, fitness graphic of how like, yes, there's like a minimum standard for health. Hard to draw that line. Depends on age, gender, lots of different factors. But if you invest beyond that into performance, you build yourself a buffer against injury, illness, and death.
Yeah, I think it's in the messaging, really, the line. It's health and performance, because you're right. I think, not to knock doctors, but for this example, they might not think of a pull-up as a health-based assessment. They would want to do something more metabolic or whatever, and that's fine. But
they probably break out a grip dynamometer.
Sure. And I think if you acknowledge that they're on a spectrum, the world of possibilities opens up to you in terms of, one, how to make health sexy, but also how to make fitness medical, which I think can be a good thing. Again, we're dancing with a potential full episode there,
and then to tie it to that, and this is where we'll get to like Krauss-Weber versus the presidential fitness test. But Krauss-Weber was like a minimum standard. Like if you can do this, you're good to go, carry on. Presidential fitness test was scored and ranked and things like that. And I'm curious about your perspective on whether an ideal solution should be a minimum threshold type of thing, like cool, you're healthy, carry on, or whether it should be this competitive scored thing.
I think it should be percentiles. I mean, I would do it just like an SAT. Like your SAT was not a competitive thing, but inevitably you'd share it with your buddies and be like, what'd you get? What'd you get? What'd you get? But when you got your results back, you were percentiled. And I think that was an interesting, it's not punitive. It's not meant to like make you feel bad, but it gives you an honest assessment of where you rank amongst your peers. And that should hopefully be enough motivation to move the needle.
We don't question that kind of approach with academics.
Yeah.
Like there are kids who struggle with academics that get embarrassed when their scores are low, but we never say that we shouldn't rank people and have scores and make it quantitative and stuff like that. It's just curious that we're like fine with it in the academic environment, and then we like get so bothered by it in the fitness environment.
Well, to have something like that, gang, you would need a national database, and you would need to actually do something with the results of these tests, which, as we've shown, is not necessarily in the purview of the Knights of the Round Table up there at the Fitness Council. So
we'll see. Maybe one day we'll have a world where like
maybe Lawrence Taylor does know what he's doing, you know?
Maybe
he's going to get up there and just take over. No idea why Bryson DeChambeau is the chair. That is insane to me. That dude is wild. Man, what a nutty. Okay. Anything else?
I think that's it. We could go obviously much deeper on like several of the topics here. We'll stand by for audience feedback on whether they want us to go down any of those rabbit holes. But it felt necessary to do an episode on the presidential fitness test, given how central it is to some of the stuff.
And guys, listen, if we sound cynical, it's just because we're tired. We're tired of the bullshit. So here's to Bryson and the team up there in the lofty towers. Saquon, well, he's not there, but Roger Goodell. Good luck, team. I look forward to see what you come up with.
Expectations are high.
Super high.
Later, guys.
Hey, Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsinmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.
Thank you.